On a humid, oak-shaded evening in Savannah, in an old library near Forsyth Park, I sat at my wooden desk, staring at my laptop. A digital scan of a 17th century manuscript, a key to colonial American history, glowed on the screen. My pen moved swiftly across a notebook, translating Latin phrases, jotting dates and names. Outside, cicadas filled the air, blending with the quiet of Savannah's historic streets. The clock showed 9. The flicker of gas lamps on the avenue spilled through the windows. My tea had gone cold, but I was still deciphering the text, lost in its secrets. This manuscript was my greatest discovery. Each line reflected my passion for reviving the past. The library breathed Savannah's storied soul. High ceilings, polished wooden shelves, leather-bound tomes, and antique lamps adorned every corner. The windows framed moss-draped oaks and Georgian mansions. 4 years ago, I'd launched this research project with Henry Clark. Our goal was to unearth lost colonial documents, reshaping America's historical narrative. That evening, I was preparing for an international history symposium. This manuscript would stun the academic world. The door creaked, and Henry stepped in. His coat collar was damp from the evening mist, but his calm smile was intact. "Charlotte, this manuscript will etch our names in history," he said, leaning on my desk. Henry Clark was our project's public face. His academic connections secured grants and invitations. "We'll dazzle them at the symposium," he added, his voice brimming with excitement. I believed him. His diplomacy carried my research to the world. But then, a notification pinged on my phone. Manuscript file locked. Unauthorized sharing. My heart sank. I showed Henry the screen. "What's this?" I asked, worry creeping into my tone. "Just a system glitch," he said, shrugging, but a flicker of tension crossed his eyes. "Don't worry, we'll check it," he said, and left quickly. Something was wrong, but the full scope of betrayal hadn't dawned. Henry, my closest colleague, was weaving a trap to ruin me and my discovery. But I knew this. When the truth broke free, I'd fight. For history, for justice, and for Savannah's legacy. My name is Charlotte Evans, and I'm 34 years old. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, shaped by its mossy streets, historic homes, and tale-filled cemeteries. My father was an archivist. My childhood was spent among ancient documents. "Charlotte, history is humanity's memory," he'd say, his voice steeped in reverence. My mother was a history teacher. She taught me that preserving the past illuminates the future. "Stories bind us," she'd say, smiling. Those passions, safeguarding history and uniting people, made me a historian. At 13, my father was hit by a scandal. A colleague at his museum stole a rare artifact and accused him of forgery. He lost his job. One evening he said, "I trusted him," his voice trembling, eyes fixed on the floor. Mom comforted him as I vowed in my room. I'd never let anyone tarnish my work. Mom's bedtime story kept me steady. Evil drowns in its own shadow. Those words became my guiding light. I studied history and archival science at the University of Georgia. After graduating, I worked at a Savannah History Institute. At 30, I launched my own project, a quest for lost colonial documents. I met Henry Clark at a history conference. Tall, courteous, and sharp-witted, he was respected in academic circles. "Charlotte, your discoveries will rewrite history," he said, raising his coffee cup. His connections paired with my archival skills. Together, we secured grants, scoured archives, and rallied Savannah's history community. Henry was a partner, a friend, or so I thought. Now, I see his manipulations, secretive meetings, calls he brushed off as trivial. I trusted him so deeply I missed the signs. That evening, I showed Henry the manuscript's translation. I'd spent hundreds of hours in archives, poring over dusty shelves, decoding Latin texts. The document unveiled an unknown colonial story. It was an academic revolution. Henry studied the screen. "Charlotte, this is phenomenal," he said, eyes gleaming. "This manuscript will launch us at the symposium." I was elated. My discovery, with his support, would reshape history books. But the next morning, the file access alert arrived. Panicked, I tried calling Henry, but he didn't answer. A week later, my world collapsed. Henry spoke on a live stream for an international history journal. Charlotte Evans stole my manuscript and passed it off as her discovery, he said, his voice laced with feigned sorrow. Screens blared my name beside Forgery. Grants were cut. Our team dissolved. My library access was revoked. Henry erased me from all databases. Savannah's academic community turned its back. My discovery was buried in scandal. That night, on my porch, I watched the Savannah River. The humid air mingled with my tears. Oak trees rustled in the breeze. Everything, my manuscript, my reputation, my passion, was gone. My father's voice echoed. I trusted him. But I wouldn't break. Mom's story returned. Evil drowns in its own shadow. Henry had branded me a forger, but this was his final mistake. The fury within me forged into resolve. Mom's story was my battle cry. Evil drowns in its own shadow. Henry had stolen my discovery, but he couldn't crush my spirit. At home, I built a research hub. Old notes, scanned documents, archive backups, all aimed at exposing the truth. I'd unmask Henry, reclaim my manuscript, and launch a heritage movement in Savannah. I contacted Abigail Foster, an editor at a local history magazine. We met at a River Street cafe, the river's ripples glinting on the windows. Charlotte, this is a vile betrayal, she said, listening. I'm in. Abigail analyzed Henry's manuscript files. The text matched my original translations. Dorothy Bennett, my mom's friend and a retired librarian, bolstered me. Charlotte, history finds the truth, she said, her eyes wise and bright. At her urging, I launched the Savannah Heritage Legacy Movement, uniting students, historians, and locals to preserve the past through seminars and digital archives. Over 12 months, I compiled Abigail's evidence. Henry's emails revealed he'd sold the manuscript to a private collector. On the Betrayal's anniversary, a history symposium filled Savannah's largest venue with scholars, enthusiasts, and press. I took the stage, heart pounding, voice steady. I exposed Henry's forgery with translation comparisons and emails. News outlets erupted. Henry issued an apology letter, but it was too late. The manuscript was donated to a museum. Our movement made Savannah a hub for historical preservation. Dorothy said, Charlotte, you've saved the past, smiling. Abigail laughed. Henry drowned in his lies. I reclaimed my honor, but the true victory was uniting the community. One evening, by the river, I watched Savannah's oaks glow in the moonlight. Mom's story was right. Honesty saved my soul. Henry was history. I was writing history.